Hello everyone, I'm Auntie Kara, but this video is not for kids. This is another edition of book recommendations for grown-ups who love fairy tales. Today we're going to be talking about one of my favorites, Outlander, the very first book in the series by Diana Galbadon. And this is a very, very popular book. I'm sure most people watching this have seen the show and maybe you're thinking, hey, is it worth a shot to give the books a try? I really, really, really love this book. I also really, really, really love the series. Pardon me. And I can't wait for more episodes to come out of the TV series, and I can't wait to have, more time that I can actually finish this series because it's very, very long. But that said, it is a remarkable book. It is so amazing. It is so imaginative. There's so much history interwoven with the magic and like cultural understanding. I'll give you a bit of an introduction of the rundown. So this book follows Claire, and Claire is a wonderful, wonderful woman who lives in the 1940s. And this book happens just after World War II has come to a close. And basically where we find Claire is her and her husband, Frank, have been separated for years by the war because they were both enlisted. Claire was working in medicine and health and stuff during the war effort, and I can't quite remember what Frank was doing. It's a little bit secretive throughout the books, but they've basically spent most of their marriage apart because they got married a little bit before the war started and have had to spend years and years apart. So they come together and kind of do a little like reunion honeymoon vacation to Scotland. And Frank is a avid hobby historian, shall we say, and his draw is very much the history of the place, and in particular he has an ancestor that was really active in the British military in that area. So they go back and they spend a lot of time with the locals, and one of the things they come across is a stone circle called Craignadoon. So I'm not going to give you too much information because I don't want to ruin anything for you, but what happens is Claire goes to these stones and just gets this overwhelming sense of something is going on, and she touches the stone and is immediately transported into the 1700s Scotland, like right at the height of the Highlander world, and just she goes from 1940s to the 1700s very quickly, and just kind of it's just such a magical book, and the characters are so rich. Claire is so resourceful. She is an herbalist as well as a nurse, so that part of it really, really speaks to me because I really, really love plant medicine. And just the imagery of the rituals and the culture and all of the history that's there, and seeing, a fairly progressive woman in the 1940s go into the 1700s and, still be telling the men what's what is really, really spectacular and really, really entertaining. And, of course, it gets her into trouble. There's tons of romance. It is a very romance-centered story, and it makes me swoon at all the parts that I read it. It's just so beautiful. So much of it is like, we should all find love like that. Maybe not all of the challenges that come along with it, but we should definitely all find love like that. And I'm only going to go into as far as this book goes because I feel like it's pretty easy to watch the series if you want to know more, or, actually invest in reading all the books. But, the time travel thing doesn't just stop with that once. There's a bit of back and forth that happens, and separation and coming back together again. It's just it's so heart-wrenching. I will put a bit of a trigger warning on this. There is quite a few instances of sexual assault and rape in this story. as it is with times. So just, be mindful, be aware that that could come up. And if that's something that you find really triggering, you might want to choose to stay away from it or choose to go into it with some support set up for yourself. But just be aware that it is there. It is not overly explicit in the book. And even in the show, like, it's there, but it's not, you don't really see a whole lot. It's more of like imagery associated with what's happening. So, it's there. It's not extremely vulgar, but it is a consideration. And of course, there's also violence and war and death and all of that sort of stuff in there. But that said, it is just so magical. The excerpt I'm going to read you today is of a group of 1940s witches in Scotland that go to do I think it is a Samhain ritual. I'm not sure if it's Samhain or something else, but I think, let's see. Yeah, I'm not sure which one it is, but I think it's Samhain. And it's just so beautiful. And when I read the books, it seemed like it was one of those books that's just like written for me, because it really has all the stuff that I love in there, like the historical fashion and the herbalism and the beauty of the landscape and the history and the rich female characters and the magic and all of that sort of thing is in there. And I really like how they play into, knowledge being considered magic before they really understood how things worked. So the fact that Claire has a lot of medicinal knowledge and just a lot of historical knowledge, a lot of people call her a witch. And it leads her to some very interesting situations. So, I highly, highly recommend this book. It is just one of the most beautiful things that is out there. It will fill your heart. It will spark your imagination. It's just all around amazing. So I'm going to read to you from the part that first captured my attention, and that's really all I'm going to read to you from today, because I just think it's so powerful and so magical. And I also feel like, because it's such a popular series, that a lot of people are familiar with this overarching storyline and plot line. So I don't want to go into too many details, but I do want to give you a taste of the writing style, because it's absolutely beautiful. It is also a very, very easy book to read. I found that I was just flying through it, whereas some books, you kind of come to parts that are a little awkward and it's not that comfortable. This one, there was none of that. It felt just super natural, super easy to read the whole way through. All right, so let's meet up with the witches. There were 15 in all, and all women, ranging in age from Mrs. Graham's 60-odd years to a young woman in her early 20s, whom I had seen pushing a pram round the shops 2 days before. All of them were dressed for rough walking, with bundles beneath their arms. With a minimum of chat, they disappeared behind stones or bushes, emerging empty-handed and bare-armed, completely clad in white. I caught the scent of laundry soap as one brushed by our clump of bushes, and recognized the garments as bed sheets wrapped around the body and knotted at the shoulder. They assembled outside the ring of stones, in a line from eldest to youngest, and stood in silence, waiting. The light in the east grew stronger. As the sun edged its way above the horizon, the line of women began to move, walking slowly between two of the stones. The leader took them directly to the center of the circle and led them round and round, still moving slowly, stately as swans in a circular procession. The leader suddenly stopped, raised her arms, and stepped into the center of the circle. Raising her face toward the pair of easternmost stones, she called out in a high voice, not loud, but clear enough to be heard throughout the circle. The still mist caught the words and made them echo, as though they came from all around, from the stones themselves. Whatever the call was, it was echoed again by the dancers, for dancers they now became, not touching, but with arms outstretched toward each other. They bobbed and weaved, still moving in a circle. Suddenly, the circle was split in half. 7 of the dancers moved clockwise, still in a circular motion. The others moved in the opposite direction. The 2 semicircles passed each other at increasing speeds, sometimes forming a complete circle, sometimes a double line. And in the center, the leader stood stock still, giving again and again that mournful, high-pitched call in a language long since dead. They should have been ridiculous, and perhaps they were. A collection of women in bedsheets, many of them stout and far from agile, parading in circles atop a hill. But the hair prickled on the back of my neck at the sound of their call. They stopped as one and turned to face the rising sun, standing in the form of 2 semicircles with a path lying clear between the halves of the circle thus formed. As the sun rose above the horizon, its light flooded between the eastern stones, knifed between the halves of the circle, and struck the great split stone on the opposite edge of the hedge. The dancers stood for a moment, frozen in the shadows to either side of the beam of light. Then Mrs. Graham said something in the same strange language, but this time in a speaking voice. She pivoted and walked, back straight, iron-gray waves glinting in the sun, along the path of light. Without a word, the dancers fell in step behind her. They passed one by one through the cleft in the main stone and disappeared in silence. Well, I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. Oh, this gives you goosebumps. So please, please, please check out this book. If you've read it and you've loved it and you want to leave me a comment, I would love to hear your thoughts. And if you plan to read it, also please let me know that. I love to hear back from people. I hope you enjoyed my review and my reading, and I will see you guys again in another couple weeks for another one. Ta-ta for now. Don't forget, keep reading.